Picture this. It is July 9th, 2006. Berlin's Olympiastadion is packed with 69,000 people. Hundreds of millions more are watching on screens in living rooms, bars, town squares, and roadside tea stalls from Sao Paulo to Seoul. The World Cup final. France versus Italy. Extra time, 0-0, 110 minutes of football that has decided nothing. And then, it happens. Zinedine Zidane, the greatest player of his generation, a man playing in the final game of his career, turns around and headbutts Italian defender Marco Materazzi square in the chest. Just like that. No warning, no precedent. The referee reaches into his pocket and pulls out a red card. Zidane walks off the pitch, past the World Cup trophy sitting on a plinth at the side of the field, not even glancing at it. France loses on penalties. The image becomes one of the most recognizable photographs of the 21st century. But how did we get here? How did a football tournament that began with just 13 nations in a small South American country in 1930 become the single most watched sporting event in the history of human civilization? Something that stops wars, unites continents, and breaks the internet every 4 years without fail? This is that story. Part 1. The Dream. To understand the World Cup, you have to understand the world it was born into. It is the late 1800s. Football is spreading across the globe with the speed and certainty of a virus. British sailors, merchants, and engineers are carrying it to every port they dock in. By 1900, the game is being played in Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, France, Germany, and Italy. It is chaotic, disorganized, beautiful, and completely ungoverned at an international level. In 1904, 7 European football associations gather in Paris and form FIFA. Their stated goal? To organize international football. Their actual challenge? To agree on anything at all. The man who changes everything is a Frenchman named Jules Rimet. He becomes FIFA president in 1921, and from the moment he takes the job, he has one obsession. He wants a World Cup, not an Olympics football tournament, a real standalone World Cup, owned by FIFA, open to professionals, contested by the world. His colleagues think he is a dreamer. Some think he is a fool. But Jules Rimet is the kind of man who understands that history is made by people who refuse to take no for an answer. After years of backroom deals and bureaucratic warfare, FIFA votes in 1928 to hold the first World Cup in 1930. The host nation, Uruguay. A tiny nation of barely 2 million people that had just won Olympic gold twice in a row and offered to pay all travel and accommodation expenses for every participating team. Money talks. It talked in 1928, and it talks today. Part 2. Montevideo, 1930. The first FIFA World Cup kicks off on July 13, 1930. 13 nations make the journey. Europe sends just 4 teams because most clubs refuse to release their players for the month-long sea voyage. The centerpiece is the newly built Estadio Centenario, a 90,000-capacity stadium constructed in less than 8 months, workers building it in shifts around the clock. Uruguay against Argentina. The first World Cup final. 93,000 people inside the stadium. More fans, unable to get tickets, climb buildings and trees outside just to hear the roar of the crowd. Argentina leads 2-1 at halftime. Uruguay scores 3 second-half goals to win 4-2. The players are national heroes. Uruguay declares a national holiday. Argentina's football federation severs diplomatic relations with Uruguay for several months. Part 3. Wars, Politics, and Survival. Here is a fact that tells you everything about the World Cup's resilience. The tournament survived 2 world wars, the Cold War, military dictatorships, and a global pandemic. It has been used as political propaganda, economic leverage, and nationalist theater. And yet, every 4 years, it comes back. Bigger, louder, more watched. Mussolini hosts the 1934 tournament and makes no secret of expecting Italy to win. He installs an Italian referee for crucial matches. Italy wins. The 1942 and 1946 tournaments are cancelled as the world burns. When football returns in 1950, held in Brazil, it feels like proof that civilization is still standing. Brazil builds the Maracanã, at the time the largest stadium ever constructed, holding over 200,000 people. The entire country is certain this is their moment. They need just a draw in the final match to be crowned champions. The newspapers have already printed the congratulatory headlines. Uruguay wins 2-1. The silence in the Maracanã that day, 200,000 people going completely quiet, is described by journalists as the loudest silence they have ever heard. The event is so traumatic, it acquires its own name, the Maracanazo. These are not just sports stories. They are stories of collective hope and collective heartbreak on a scale that no other event in the world can manufacture. Part 4, Pele, Television, and the World Starts Watching. The World Cup changes forever in 1958 because of a 17-year-old kid from Brazil named Pele. He is the youngest player in the tournament. He scores a hat trick in the semifinal. In the final against Sweden, playing in front of 51,000 Swedish fans who expected their own team to win on home soil, Pele scores twice in Brazil's 5-2 victory. After Brazil's second goal, the Swedish fans, who came to cheer against Brazil, stand and applaud. They have forgotten who they are supposed to be cheering for. Pele weeps after the final whistle. He is 17 years old. He has just won the World Cup. The other thing that makes 1958 pivotal is television. For the first time, portions of World Cup matches are broadcast live across Europe. A switch has been flipped. The World Cup is no longer just an event you attend, it is an event you watch, and that distinction will change everything. By 1970, when Pele leads Brazil to their third title in Mexico, the tournament is broadcast in color for the first time. The football is so aesthetically overwhelming that sports writers run out of adjectives. Brazil's goal against Italy in the final, a flowing 20-pass move finished by Carlos Alberto, is voted the greatest goal in World Cup history and is still used as the textbook definition of what football can be at its absolute peak. Part 5, The Hand of God. No story of how this tournament became the biggest event on Earth can skip June 22, 1986. Argentina versus England, Estadio Azteca, Mexico City, a quarterfinal. 4 years earlier, Argentina and Britain fought a war over the Falkland Islands. Hundreds of people died. The wounds have not healed. This is not just a football match. In the 51st minute, Diego Maradona rises to meet a high ball and punches it into the net with his left hand. The referee, who does not see it, awards the goal. England protests furiously. The goal stands. 4 minutes later, Maradona picks up the ball in his own half and runs. He beats 5 England players and the goalkeeper before rolling the ball into the net. It is later voted the goal of the century. In the post-match press conference, a journalist asks Maradona about the first goal. He smiles and says it was scored a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. The hand of God. One of the most famous phrases in the history of sport. Spoken by a man who has just committed the most outrageous act of cheating in World Cup history with an expression of complete, magnificent, unapologetic impudence. What does this tell us? It tells us that the World Cup produces characters of such complexity, such contradiction, such flawed and blazing humanity that no fiction writer could invent them, and the world cannot stop watching. Part 6. The machine gets bigger. Something fundamental shifts in the 1990s. The World Cup stops being just a sporting event and becomes an industry. The 1994 World Cup in the United States, a country where football is not even the 4th most popular sport, sells out every venue. Over 3.5 million fans attend. The tournament ends with Brazil versus Italy decided by a penalty shootout. Roberto Baggio, Italy's great hope, steps up for the decisive penalty. He blazes it over the bar. He stands with his head bowed, his hands on his knees, the weight of an entire nation's heartbreak visible in the line of his shoulders. The photograph is one of the most reproduced sports images ever taken. An entire country's dream, captured in one man's posture. The 1998 World Cup in France brings 32 teams for the first time. Television rights money explodes. FIFA transforms from a sporting association into something resembling a sovereign nation-state, with its own revenues, its own diplomatic relationships, and, as the world will eventually discover, its own very significant problems with corruption. The 2002 World Cup in Japan and South Korea delivers the tournament's most chaotic edition. France, the defending champions with Zidane, Henry, and Vieira, goes out in the group stage without scoring a single goal. South Korea reaches the semifinals, becoming the first Asian nation to do so. Millions of South Korean fans gather in public squares dressed in red, screaming themselves hoarse. The 2010 World Cup goes to South Africa, the first ever held on the African continent. Nelson Mandela's country hosts the world. Spain wins its first title. Andres Iniesta's winner in extra time stops an entire country in its tracks. Millions flood the streets of Madrid. They are still there at dawn. Part 7. The Miracles. Every World Cup produces at least one miracle. A story so improbable that if you put it in a screenplay, the studio would tell you no audience would believe it. In 2014, the miracle is Germany versus Brazil in the semi-final. Germany scores in the 11th minute, then the 23rd, then the 24th, then the 26th, then the 29th. 4 goals in 6 minutes. Brazil, at home, in front of 70,000 of their own fans, is being dismantled in real time. Final score, Germany 7, Brazil 1. The match acquires its own name, the Mineirazo, Brazil's second great national football trauma. Then comes 2022, Qatar, the most controversial World Cup in history, and the best football in a generation. Lionel Messi, the greatest player of his generation. The man who had spent his entire career being told he could never be truly great because he had never won a World Cup. Standing in the tunnel in Lusail Stadium at 35 years old, pulling on his jersey for what everyone assumes will be his final World Cup match. The final against France is the greatest World Cup final ever played, and the argument is not close. Argentina leads 2-0 with 15 minutes remaining. Then Kylian Mbappe scores twice in 2 minutes. 2-2. Extra time. Messi scores again. Mbappe scores again from the spot. A hat-trick. 3-3. Penalty shootout. Argentina wins. Messi holds the trophy above his head. He has been chasing this moment his entire adult life. He weeps. His teammates weep. 800 million people are watching. In Buenos Aires, over 4 million people flood the streets, the largest spontaneous gathering in South American history. Part 8. The numbers that stop the argument. Let's talk about scale, because the numbers are almost incomprehensible. The 2022 World Cup final was watched by an estimated 1.5 billion people in a single broadcast window. The entire tournament reached approximately 5 billion unique viewers, roughly 60% of every human being alive on Earth. By comparison, the Super Bowl draws around 115 million viewers. The NBA Finals around 15 million. Nothing competes with the World Cup, not even close. FIFA has 211 member associations, more than the United Nations, which has 193. Its reach, in purely geographic and demographic terms, exceeds that of any government, any religion, any single corporation on Earth. Coca-Cola has partnered with FIFA since 1950. Adidas has supplied the match ball since 1970. These companies do not spend billions sponsoring the World Cup because they like football. They spend it because no other platform on Earth reaches so many people simultaneously. This is the paradox at the heart of everything. The World Cup is simultaneously the purest sporting competition on Earth. 11 players against 11, the simplest game, no equipment required beyond a ball, and the most commercial event in human history. Part 9. Why it matters. But here is the real question, the one underneath all of this. The World Cup is corrupt. FIFA is corrupt. Workers have died building the stadiums. Rights have been violated. Justice has been buried. All of this is true. And yet 5 billion people watch. Nations stop. Wars pause. There are documented cases of regional conflicts suspending hostilities during World Cup matches. People who have never spoken to each other find themselves in a bar at 3 a.m., sharing a table and screaming at the same screen. Why? Because football is the one truly universal language. Not English, not music, not cinema. Football. You can go to any country on Earth and find people who know what a penalty is, who have a local team they feel in their bones. The rules require almost no translation. The emotional arc, attack, defend, score, celebrate, concede, despair, is human in the most fundamental way. The 4-year cycle creates a generational rhythm. You remember where you were for each one. You remember who you watched it with. You remember being 12 and watching Zidane headbutt Materazzi and not understanding the world. You remember staying up until 2 a.m. to watch your country score in the 90th minute and running into the street in your pajamas. The World Cup is not just a tournament, it is a generational memory device, a collective timestamp. The thing that tells you, decades later, exactly how old you were and who you were with when the whole world was watching the same thing. Jules Rimet believed that football played at the highest level, by the best players, in front of the whole world, would create something larger than sport. A shared human experience. He was right. He was so spectacularly, overwhelmingly right that even the corruption and the billion-dollar deals cannot diminish the core of what he built. Epilogue. In 2026, the World Cup comes to the United States, Canada, and Mexico. 48 teams, 16 cities, 2 continents. The largest tournament in history. FIFA projects cumulative viewership could approach 6 billion. The critics say it is too big, too commercial, too far from those 13 nations in Montevideo in 1930. Maybe. Or maybe some 17-year-old kid from a country that has never won anything will step onto the pitch, take one touch, flick the ball over a defender's head, and volley it into the top corner. And the fans of the opposing team will stand up and applaud. And somewhere, Pele will be watching. and somewhere, Maradona will be smiling, and Jules Rimet, if there is any justice in whatever comes after, will be nodding slowly. The dream he had in 1921 is the biggest thing humanity has ever built together,